What if the moment you wanted most to forget became the key to a destiny you never imagined? Imagine being 24 years old, seated in your very first corporate meeting. The room smells faintly of burnt coffee and expensive cologne. You're surrounded by suits that seem stitched from confidence, by people fluent in a language of ambition that you've only studied from the outside. The fluorescent lights above hum like a warning siren, each one buzzing with the weight of unspoken expectations. You clutch a stack of documents, your lifeline, and they feel like lead in your arms. Your palms sweat, heart racing against the quiet hush of the room. And then it happens. One misstep. A tangle of nerves and high heels, you fall, hard, papers scattering like broken dreams across the polished marble floor. In that instant, the air shifts. 1,000 silent judgments, stifled chuckles, eyes that see not a person but a mistake. But here's what no one knew, not even the young woman kneeling to gather her dignity in shredded pieces. One pair of eyes wasn't laughing. One soul saw something different, saw brilliance buried beneath trembling fingers. That person would soon leave her a handwritten note, one that would quietly ignite a firestorm, a note that would crack open a billion-dollar empire, revealing not just corruption, but the lost pieces of two people's truth. This isn't just a story about corporate secrets. It's about the quiet kind of courage, the invisible strength it takes to rise, not just from a fall, but from a life that told you you were too small to matter. Lena Torres was about to find out that the mysterious notes left on her desk weren't just kindness. They were breadcrumbs leading her to a truth more dangerous and beautiful than anything she had imagined. In the towering canyons of Manhattan, where ambition roars louder than sirens, and dreams are often traded for job titles, Lena walked softly. She moved through the city like a whisper, like she was apologizing for every inch of space she took. At just 24, she had the quiet kind of intelligence that gets overlooked in a world chasing charisma. Her apartment in Queens was small, overstuffed with secondhand furniture, unpaid medical bills, and the scent of ginger tea her mother drank to soothe the pain of chronic illness. Lena had learned early how cruel words could be. As a child with a stutter, she'd endured years of ridicule, each laugh carving deeper into her silence. Over time, she spoke less, but when she did, her words were carefully chosen, carrying weight. Inside her, an unspoken hunger lived, a need to tell stories that mattered, to lift the invisible into the light. Every morning she rode the subway into the city, eyes tracing the foggy skyline with hope she barely dared to name. Landing an internship at Kingsley Media Group felt like slipping through a hidden door into a world that was never meant for her. The building itself was a glass cathedral to capitalism. Inside, people moved with razor-sharp purpose, their footsteps echoing with certainty. Lena, in her worn blazer and sensible shoes, felt like she was playing dress-up in a world she hadn't earned, but beneath her nerves lived a fire, a determination to matter in a world that had always looked past her. Kingsley wasn't just a workplace. It was a battlefield dressed in designer labels. On the 42nd floor, where million-dollar deals were made over lunch orders and LinkedIn titles, Camille Dorson reigned. At 35, she was lethal grace in heels, her words cut deep, but always with a smile. Her ally, Daniel Moore, was colder still, a finance executive who measured value in numbers, not names. To him, interns were speed bumps, necessary inconveniences on the road to quarterly goals. But not everyone at Kingsley had bartered away their souls. Ellen McCarthy was proof. At 70, she poured coffee for boardrooms like a ghost, silent but ever-present. No one remembered she'd once been a celebrated journalist, a firebrand voice in a world that valued truth. She noticed Lena, not because of her fall, but because of what she carried in her silence. Ellen saw it, a hunger for truth, a poet's ear for language, and most importantly, the rare ability to listen in a world addicted to noise. Then there was Theo. Theodore Kingsley drifted through the creative department like smoke, unbothered, half there. At 28, he looked like the kind of man who belonged both everywhere and nowhere. His jeans were perfectly worn, his t-shirt soft with memory, but his eyes, they held a kind of ache, the shadow of someone who'd once been seen too clearly. No one knew the truth. Theo wasn't just another creative. He was the Kingsley, the heir. His family name glittered on the building's directory. But Theo didn't want power, not the way his father had defined it. He'd watched money devour love, watched someone he trusted trade their most intimate moments for headlines. Since then, he'd lived quietly, leaving scraps of poetry, notes with no signature, as if trying to speak without being known. He had the uncanny ability to feel what people wouldn't say. He heard heartache like others hear laughter. And so, the morning Lena presented her first big pitch, while rain painted streaks down the conference room glass. Theo was already listening. She had labored for days over her proposal, polishing every word until it sang. To her, it wasn't just a campaign, it was a lifeline, a bridge between the cold machinery of corporate life and the aching human stories it so often silenced. She stood alone at the front, heart thudding, voice steady despite everything, and in that moment, unseen by most, two lives quietly began to shift. Not through a grand gesture, but through a single look, a single note, and a choice that would echo across boardrooms, hearts, and hidden corners of power. The weight of the presentation materials felt disproportionate as Lena arranged them around the gleaming conference table. 12 leather chairs surrounded the glossy surface like thrones waiting to be claimed, seats reserved for people who could, with a single glance, either shape her future or crush it without a word. It wasn't just a room, it was a battlefield dressed as a boardroom. Every step she took across the polished floor echoed with the thunder of self-doubt. They entered one by one, executives who moved like seasoned warriors preparing for battle. Camille Dorson, every inch the queen of this kingdom, smiled with the precision of a blade hidden in silk. Daniel Moore followed, clipboard in hand, eyes already scanning for weaknesses to exploit. Then the others, names Lena had studied like a foreign language, their expressions revealing nothing, their attention expensive and hard-earned. And finally, Theo, quiet, almost invisible, he slipped into a chair near the back, a pen in hand, notebook open, not for scoring, not for grading, for witnessing. He was not there to dissect her, he was there to see her. Standing at the head of the room, Lena felt like a single flame in a hall of mirrors. Her fingers trembled around the notes she had poured her soul into, but when she spoke, her voice did not betray her. It carried the resolve of someone who'd practiced late into the night, someone who wasn't speaking to impress but to connect. Her pitch wasn't about buzzwords or marketing fluff. It was rooted in real experience, in stories of the people she'd grown up with, in communities ignored and overlooked. For a moment, a precious, fleeting moment, it was working. Daniel jotted something down. Camille nodded thoughtfully. Even the others leaned in, eyes focused. Lena felt a flicker of hope swell inside her chest. It was fragile, but intoxicating. Maybe, just maybe, they saw her. But destiny, it seems, has a cruel sense of timing. As she moved to hand out supplementary packets, her foot snagged on a chair leg. In that split second, the air froze, time unraveled. Her body pitched forward. The papers she'd arranged with such care exploded into the air, an unintentional celebration of catastrophe. The thud of her knee against the marble floor rang out like a bell of humiliation. Then silence, the kind that suffocates, the kind that screams louder than laughter. 12 pairs of eyes watched her scramble to retrieve her dignity, her face flushed with shame so raw it stung. Somewhere, someone cleared their throat. Another rustled papers to mask discomfort. Camille's lips curved into a smile, a sharp, satisfied thing. "Well," Daniel muttered, back scratching against his pad. "That was unfortunate." Lena didn't need to see the words to know what he wrote. Careless, immature, not ready. The energy in the room shifted like a tide turning cold. Her voice, once steady, now felt hollow as she finished the rest of her presentation. An echo of something that once mattered. The questions that followed were cursory, polite, but indifferent. Her work, her vision, her hours of labor, they'd all vanished under the weight of one misstep. As the meeting ended, the room emptied quickly, executives slipping past her without so much as a glance. Lena remained, pretending to organize papers while trying to stitch together the remains of her composure. Camille offered a smile so saccharine it stung. "Better luck next time, sweetheart," she whispered with a voice dipped in both pity and poison. Daniel didn't even acknowledge her. The future she'd worked so hard for seemed to close a door in her face. But then, just as she reached for the final page, her fingers brushed against something foreign. A folded piece of paper, clean edges, tucked beside her laptop bag with the kind of precision that suggested intention, not accident. Lena unfolded it slowly, heart hammering in her chest. "They saw you fall, I saw you stand. Don't let their laughter steal your voice." The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, every letter chosen with the care of someone who understands the weight of words. She looked around the now empty room, searching for a sign of the author. Nothing. No movement, no clue, just a note that pulsed with warmth in her pocket, like someone had handed her a piece of courage when she needed it most. That note changed everything. Over the next few days, more messages appeared. Folded slips left like whispers under her keyboard, slipped into her reports, tucked beside her coffee mug in the break room, each written in the same hand, each arriving when her confidence faltered. When a project overwhelmed her, a note reminded her complexity is just simplicity that hasn't found its voice. When Camille dismissed her ideas with a polite scoff, the best ideas sound crazy to those who've forgotten how to dream. When Daniel's remarks cut too deep, excellence is built on what you learn from the fall. They never asked for acknowledgement, never demanded gratitude. They simply appeared. Quiet truths from someone who was watching, not to judge, but to lift. In a building where most treated her like furniture, someone saw her as a flame worth shielding. One afternoon, as Lena sipped coffee in the quiet break room on the 12th floor, Ellen McCarthy approached. The woman moved like a ghost wrapped in warmth. Always present, rarely noticed. "You've been getting notes," Ellen said, without preamble, voice soft but knowing. It wasn't a question. Lena blinked. "How did you?" Ellen smiled, sharp and kind. "Honey, I've been invisible in this place for 30 years. When no one sees you, you learn how to see everything." She refilled Lena's cup with the care of a friend, not a service worker. "The young man who's been writing to you, he's been watching since your first day." Lena's breath caught. "You know who it is?" Ellen studied her, weighing her next words like they mattered, which they did. "The question isn't if I know. The question is, are you ready to know?" She sat, her presence grounding. "That presentation you gave? It was good. So good it scared the people who've been coasting on privilege and polish. That fall? It didn't define you. It revealed them. But none of it matters if no one takes me seriously." Oh, but someone did. Enough to write you words with weight. Enough to keep showing up, in ink and silence. Ellen's eyes sparkled. Sometimes, the most powerful person in a room is the one who chooses not to use their power, and sometimes, the quietest voice carries the most truth. From that day forward, Lena couldn't stop thinking about the notes or their author. She started lingering in parts of the building she didn't usually visit, observing, listening, hoping, and it was in those quiet wanderings that she discovered the after-howls hum of the creative department. While the executive suites emptied by 5:30 like clockwork, the creative floor pulsed with life. Music played softly, ideas spilled across whiteboards like wildflowers, laughter rose between intense bursts of silence. It was chaotic and beautiful. And always was Theo, bent over sketches, his fingers smudged with graphite, his notebook thick with storyboards. He worked with the focus of someone building something bigger than a campaign. He was crafting meaning. His process was visceral. He didn't just think. He felt. He touched. He lived his work. And Lena found herself drawn to that world like a tide to the moon. She began working late more often, timing her hours so their paths might cross. She told herself it was about inspiration, about learning, but deep down she was chasing the presence of someone who understood her, even if she didn't yet know their name. And though she didn't know it yet, she was getting closer. Lena's nightly detours to the creative department became increasingly intentional. Sometimes it was to check the printer, other times to borrow a workspace, but always near Theo's desk. The quiet rhythm of his actions began to echo with familiarity. The way he paused thoughtfully before putting pen to paper, his careful penmanship, his ability to listen more than he spoke. It all resonated with something deeply personal. She began to wonder, could it really be him? The notes, the empathy, the insight, everything aligned. But she couldn't bring herself to believe it fully, not without proof. And then the truth revealed itself in the quietest way. One late evening, blurry-eyed from chasing an impossible deadline set by Camille, Lena searched the creative department's archives for campaign inspiration. Hidden among folders of market analytics and campaign pitches, she discovered one titled Community Voices Initiative. Her heart paused. That name, it was almost identical to the project she had proposed weeks earlier during the now infamous presentation. Opening the document, her breath caught in her throat. It was stunning. A strategic masterpiece. Every element of her original idea had been refined, amplified. Where her words had once stumbled, here they soared. It was her voice, but tuned with the sophistication of experience and influence. The tone was confident, empathetic, brilliant. It was the campaign she had dreamed of. Real community engagement, corporate responsibility with heart. And then she saw it. The document's metadata revealed a revision history, sections of text clearly sourced from another internal file. That file had been created the day after her presentation. Her ideas had been heard, not dismissed, not forgotten. Someone had cared enough to elevate her concept into something powerful. And that someone was 30 feet away, sketching quietly beneath the soft hum of overhead lights. Dio. The next morning began like any other. Coffee, composure, silence, until she opened her inbox. Camille had summoned the department heads. Subject line, resource allocation review, immediate action required. It wasn't just ominous, it was a corporate war drum. She entered the same conference room where her career had nearly ended once before. But this time, she wasn't presenting. She was the agenda. Daniel Moore opened the meeting with the theatrical severity of a prosecutor delivering a sentence. "We've identified irregularities in our creative development process," he announced, the words cold and deliberate. Specifically, access to proprietary materials by unauthorized personnel. Lena's heart dropped. She couldn't breathe. "They think I stole something." Emile took over smoothly. Our IT audit shows confidential files were accessed after hours by someone without clearance. This points to either negligence or intentional misconduct. The air thickened with implication. A security breach, a veiled accusation of corporate espionage. It sounded like something from a movie, not the truth of a young woman working overtime to meet impossible demands. Lena tried to speak, to explain, but Camille's voice was louder, more practiced. Due to the severity of this violation, we have no choice but to terminate the internship of Lena Torres, effective immediately. Silence. Lena sat frozen as the world collapsed around her. Public humiliation, an unspoken accusation of theft, her reputation shredded in moments. The people around the table looked anywhere but at her, complicit in their quietness, everyone except Tio. "Denti, help me!" He stood slowly, like gravity itself had grown heavier with the decision he was about to make. "Before this termination proceeds," he said evenly, "I believe there are a few things that need to be clarified." Emil's eyes narrowed. "Theo, this isn't the time for creative input." "You're right," Theo agreed, his calm unshaken. "It's a security matter, which is why we should all be very clear about what's actually happened." He walked to the front of the room with a stillness that demanded attention, not from title, but truth. The files Lena accessed were not stolen. They were based on her own original presentation, the very same ideas she shared in this room weeks ago, before being dismissed and ridiculed. Gasps stirred like distant thunder. Daniel's face shifted from control to confusion. Camille's smile turned to ice. "I'm not implying, I'm stating facts," Theo continued. On March 15th, Lena proposed a community outreach initiative. On March 16th, a member of our creative team began building a revised proposal based on her exact framework. He tapped his phone and connected it to the display. What you call a breach is her discovering that someone took her vision and ran with it, without credit or consent. Camille, ever composed, pushed back. "That's quite a theory, but unauthorized access is still a violation." Theo nodded. "You're right, and all the actions in this situation deserve clarity." On the screen appeared a detailed timeline, emails, edits, timestamps, evidence of a pattern. Idea theft, credit manipulation, the erasure of junior voices. Lena's experience was not an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of a deeper rot. Daniel stood, furious. "This is inappropriate. You're making accusations without proper authority." "You're right again," Theo said, "which is why I've already forwarded everything to the board, along with a formal complaint outlining the risks of ongoing IP theft under current management." The room erupted into hushed panic. "You have no right," Daniel snapped. "You're a junior creative. You don't make demands." Theo's voice dropped, quiet but unyielding. "I haven't been honest about who I am, and I apologize for that. But it ends today." He looked up. "My name is Theodore Kingsley. My father built this company, and starting now I intend to protect what he stood for." The room stilled. Reality shifted. Theo announced, "Miss Torres will return to work tomorrow. She'll receive a formal apology and assume the position of Junior Communications Strategist. She will lead the Community Voices Initiative with full credit and full authority." The room emptied in hurried shame. Camille and Daniel exited in whispers, planning their damage control. Lena remained, dazed, overwhelmed, changed. Theo approached gently. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything." "Will, didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why hide who you were? Why let me suffer?" "Because once people know who I am," he said softly, "I stop being a person. I become a strategy, a shortcut, an advantage. With you, I got to be human. I got to help without agenda. She stared at him, her heart aching. You could have stopped all this, she said. Needed. I know, he whispered. But I needed you to know you belonged here because of your brilliance, not because of me. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. Gratitude, understanding, the ache of being seen. Those notes, she said, her voice breaking. They saved me? Theo met her eyes. You were never fooling anyone, Lena, least of all yourself. That presentation, it wasn't just good, it was revolutionary. And you're just getting started. The day you stumbled, that was the day you showed them something extraordinary, Theo had once said. That wasn't failure, it was vision. It was leadership under pressure. I didn't create your brilliance, Lena. I just tried to help them finally see what had been burning inside you all along. And now, months later, Lena was no longer the intern who tripped under pressure. She was the architect of change. She dove into the development of the Community Voices initiative with a ferocity that came not from ambition, but from purpose. Her new office, modest but with a real door, a window overlooking the city, felt like more than a promotion. It felt like a promise that her voice would no longer be ignored. This was no longer about survival. It was about impact. Ellen, now a trusted advisor and confidant, visited often. She offered wisdom wrapped in wit and lessons sharpened by decades of surviving corporate turbulence. The secret, Ellen told her one afternoon, is to make people feel like they're joining something revolutionary, not being replaced by it. No one wants to be left behind. Invite them forward. Theo, ever respectful of Lena's space, kept a careful professional distance during working hours. He wanted her success to stand on its own, untouched by his name. But after hours, when the offices quieted and the fluorescent lights dimmed to something almost soft, they would often stay behind, brainstorming, building, sharing. During those late nights, they peeled back the armor they wore by day. Theo spoke of his lost music, the chords he used to write, the songs that once gave his emotions somewhere to live. Lena shared stories of her mother, the Queens neighborhood that raised her, the invisible burdens she carried for the dreams of those who'd never been invited into boardrooms. They learned each other's real languages, not of strategy or pitch decks, but of vulnerability and hope. Then came the inaugural Community Voices event. Held on a brisk Saturday morning in a community center in Queens, her neighborhood, Lena insisted it happened there, against corporate preferences. Authentic engagement, she argued, had to be earned on the community's turf, not performed under the Manhattan skyline. The turnout was staggering. Local business owners, high school journalists, retired teachers, single parents, people who had never before been asked what they needed were suddenly sitting at the same tables, sharing the same conversations. A web of humanity began to form, strangers connecting over shared challenges and long-ignored dreams. The moment that changed everything came during the open mic. Maria Santos, a single mother, janitor by night, nursing student by day, stood trembling before the room. Her voice was unsure at first, then slowly sharpened with the power of truth. I've been invisible my whole life, she said. I clean your offices while you sleep. I raise my children while you work. I study for my future while you plan yours. But today, someone is finally listening. The room exploded in applause. Not polite, not forced, real, raw, human. And in the back of the room, Theo sat with tears in his eyes, his pen still, because in that moment he understood. Lena hadn't just created a campaign, she had redefined what it meant to matter. She'd built a bridge between worlds that had forgotten how to speak to each other. As the initiative gained real traction and unexpected national media attention, Lena found herself facing a far more personal dilemma. She was falling in love, not with a title or a name or a legacy, but with him, the man who had once left folded notes like lifelines, the man whose last name could move markets, but whose soul had never asked to be seen that way. Their conversation happened on a warm Thursday evening, alone in the same conference room where her life had nearly derailed months earlier. Theo was sketching ideas on the whiteboard. Lena, sorting through community survey data, finally set down her pen. "I need to ask you something," she said softly. Theo turned, instantly attentive. "When you wrote me those notes, was that you? Or just another strategy from a guy raised to play chess with people's lives?" The question hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be handed down. Theo's expression shifted. Hurt, honesty, then clarity. "The notes," he said gently, "were the realest thing I've ever done. Everything else, the corporate chess, the identity reveal, that was complicated. But those notes, that was instinct. That was heart. That was me seeing you and needing you to see yourself, too." He stepped closer. "I fell in love with your mind before I ever knew your name, with your courage before I knew your story, with your fire before I understood your mission." He smiled, eyes shimmering. "They weren't just notes, Lena. They were love letters from a man who saw greatness and couldn't bear for the world to miss it." 6 months after the day she was nearly cast out, Lena returned to that same conference room, this time standing tall, presenting the expansion of the Community Voices initiative to the full board of directors. No longer an intern, clawing for respect. Now, a respected leader whose vision had changed lives and redefined what business could mean. As she set her folder on the table, she found a note familiar, folded with exacting precision. 6 months ago, they watched you fall in this room. Today, they get to watch you soar. But I've been watching you fly all along." She looked up to see Theo in the doorway, no longer hidden, standing with her, beside her, fully seen, fully known. The presentation was flawless, but more importantly, it was real. She spoke not only of KPIs and budget models, but of Maria Santos, now a licensed nurse thanks to the fund Lena had helped build, of high school students launching real businesses, of elderly voices being preserved in digital oral histories. When the applause came, it was sustained and reverent, but Lena didn't measure victory in decibels. She felt it in her chest, in the quiet certainty that she had created something that would outlive applause. Her office now, a sunlit corner suite filled with color and warmth, was not adorned with corporate awards. Instead, handwritten notes from community members lined the walls, every one a testament to the quiet revolution she had sparked. And beside her desk, framed in glass, were the very first folded notes from Thea, proof that a single act of belief can change everything. He thought like hell was enough. On quiet nights, the building empty, the city a blur of lights outside the windows, Lena and Theo still worked late. But now there was music. Theo had returned to the piano, not with sorrow, but with hope, and the melodies he played weren't about regret. They were about possibilities, partnership, healing. You see, the story wasn't really about corporate sabotage or even romantic rescue. It was about something much more powerful. The moment someone sees you, not for what you lack, but for what you are becoming, and helps you see it too. So if you've ever been the one waiting to be noticed, or the one in power who can choose to notice, remember this. The smallest act of belief can echo for a lifetime. In a noisy world, kindness is rebellion. Quiet voices matter, And sometimes, the most extraordinary love stories begin not with a grand gesture, but with a simple folded note. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. You are seen, you are valuable, and your quiet voice might be the one the world is waiting for.